Hi, my name's Warren Mailley-Smith. I'm a concert pianist from London, and welcome to my channel. This is my weekly live broadcast from St Mary the Strand every week on Wednesday evening, 5:30 p.m. And the idea is we're just talking about every week a different topic to do with performing or playing the piano. And also I'm giving you guys, just sharing some practice tips and advice generally. And I'm also going to ask you guys a question. Please feel free at any point during the stream, just to, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to say, please do put it in the box and I'll be really pleased to answer it for you next week. I thought we'd talk just a little bit for a couple of minutes about a little bit more, in fact, about preparing for a performance, because I think this is a really important thing for all of us, whether we're doing an exam or a diploma, or we're playing for an informal event, or maybe even a big concert. It's this question of the best way of actually preparing ourselves and making sure that when we walk out and we sit down on the piano stool, that we really play our best, that we play as close to how we know we can play when we're practicing as possible. So I've literally just got a few points, and these really aren't the gospel of exactly how to prepare for performance. They're just a variety of things that I've found to really help me steady nerves and really feel that I was absolutely in control when I go out and perform. So these are some things I'd really encourage you guys to actually experiment with some of these, and certainly to think about them. And you may find that the polar opposite works for you. But I think the main thing about this is it's important to have some strategies and some little tricks up your sleeve that can help you to perform your absolute best. Make sure that you're really hydrated and that you don't go on hungry. I'm always ravenous, to be honest, at the best of times, but I think be very careful that you don't that you've been so occupied with the upcoming performance on the day that you've actually forgotten to have breakfast, or you haven't eaten lunch. I think just having a banana or a bit of chocolate or sandwich, for me, I always do that about half an hour before I go on. But definitely make sure that you're always drinking some water or coffee or whatever it might be, but making sure you're hydrated. It's amazing how, particularly in a whole recital program, how much you can really get dehydrated. So that's very important. I always try to turn my phone off for an hour or so before a performance, just to avoid distractions. It really helps you to focus all of your thoughts on what you're about to do. Also, I find just close your eyes for 5 minutes and just kind of wherever you are, if in a room backstage, or there might be lots of things going on around you, but just to close your eyes and again just visualise yourself feeling relaxed, happy and confident. Visualise yourself walking out, sitting down at the piano and feeling relaxed, and just listening and playing the music in your head. And really just having that kind of feeling of calm with your eyes closed, I think is really useful strategy. Breathing deeply. Try to be conscious of your breathing. That goes for when we're playing the piano as well. We talked about that a little bit last week, but I think it's a great way of calming yourself down if you might be feeling a bit nervous. Taking a really deep breath in and counting out to 20, and then doing that maybe for 2 or 3 minutes. It can have a fantastic effect on just grounding yourself. Um, yeah, I'd love to hear some of your ideas. I mean, there's one other thing I love doing, which is, luckily no one gets to see, which is I jump up and down. Probably look like a bit of a lunatic before I go on. But I find it, if I've got a bit of nervous energy, it's a great way of just getting rid of it. And again, just feeling that little bit calmer after I've done it. I can't recommend enough how great it is just to sit there and look at your music without actually having other distractions around. So just focusing on the score and just reminding yourself of certain details, thinking about the tempos, just thinking about how you want it to sound and how you want it to feel when you go on. It's a very big topic. You could probably talk about all of those things in lots of detail, but the idea of this is just to, I think, stimulate some ideas, and yeah, please let me know how you deal with those final few hours in preparing for a performance. So, thank you very much everyone, by the way, for your recent questions. I had some great questions the other day from John. John, I won't be able to answer all of them in this session, but there was one question that was really interesting for me personally, which is what repertoire I'd like to play more of. And you know, I think the thing about playing the piano is it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because there's not just a lot of music, lot of repertoire. There's a vast amount of music that's been written over the centuries for the piano, and the sad truth is that even if you were to learn about 10 new pieces a day, you wouldn't get through half of it in a lifetime, probably not even a tenth of it. So when we're choosing our repertoire, we obviously have to be very selective. I can say now I also have a pile of music on my piano at home, which is a mixture of stuff that I'm learning, and more often than not it's a pile of stuff that I want to learn, so it's just kind of looking at me. And I also keep a no pun intended, but a shopping list of my kind of pieces, that not just that I've committed myself to learn, but also that I just really would love to play. So for me, there's a big section of music that I haven't indulged in enough, ideally, and that is English piano music. There's so much music written in the 20th century, in particular, this was the first half of the 20th century, by composers such as Bridge, Delius, John Ireland, and York Bowen, whose music has this, for me, a really amazing kind of fusion of different influences. And I have played some of that repertoire, but it's definitely something that I'd love to spend more time playing in an ideal world. And yeah, I think it's this combination of, obviously the big romantic repertoire that came out of both of Europe and Russia. So there's a lot of, for example, you can hear a lot of Brahms' influence in York Bowen, as well as Rachmaninoff's. But there's also this kind of fusion of jazz that was obviously developing rapidly in the popular scene, and that was just spilling over into these composers' music. And I think also French Impressionism was a huge influence as well. So all of those things feed into this English, these English composers' music, and I think it's a treasure trove of stuff. I've played some York Bowen, but would love to do more. So to finish up today's little broadcast, just wanted to share a kind of practice tip of the day. or practice tip of the week. And yeah, last week we talked a little bit about memorising and some tips on memorising. This week, this sounds a little bit unimaginative, but just wanted to talk about scales. I think they're one of the first things that we ever have to do when we start learning to play the piano or any other instrument. And I think actually that the better you get at playing the piano, the more important they become. And when scales get really useful, obviously we have to learn the notes, so we have to learn the fingerings, we want to get them even, more or less. But I think they get really, really useful when we know them well enough that we don't actually need to think so much about what the notes are and what fingers we have to use, but they're just patterns in our hands. Where they're really useful is when we can actually think about everything else that's going on while we're playing them. So in other words, thinking about how we're using our whole bodies, and from our feet to our head to what our shoulders are doing, basically ingraining kind of good physical habits into ourselves while we're playing the scales. Thinking about, for example, your hand position, thinking about your wrist position, making sure that the hands don't go into funny positions while you're playing, but always allowing the fingers to be free, this kind of curved shape in your hands. And sometimes, these are things when we don't feel comfortable with exactly what fingers or we need to use, when we're not 100% sure of the patterns, then all of our thoughts are going into just getting it right. We're not able to think so much about everything else. And I think that principle that applies to kind of any technical exercise you do. So yeah, so that's the first thing, is thinking about how you're using your body and how your posture is when you're playing your scales. But also making sure that you're always kind of spicing things up a little bit, in as much as you can spice up a scale, but actually not just going through the motions, but also making things a little bit more interesting and a little bit harder for yourself. So, for example, crossing your hands, sort of playing like that, actually doing the same fingers but just upside down, using different rhythms and playing with different dynamics and articulation. Basically anything to kind of make it feel a little bit harder, to keep you really focused on what you're doing. And there are very few pieces ever written that don't have a scale or part of a scale in them somewhere. They're kind of the building blocks, along with arpeggios, of course, but just talk about scales. They're the building blocks of playing piano, and it's very tempting to think of them as that we have to do them just to get through our grades. And of course we do, but actually they really start to become more useful, after that. So yeah, get stuck into your scales, even if you just do one a day, one per practice, then that's doing your piano playing some good. I just wanted to ask you for a question of the week, is who was Frank Bridges' most famous pupil? I think he was a private pupil, but yeah, do let me know below, and look forward to seeing you guys next week.